Imagine sitting in a cold, damp prisoner of war camp somewhere in Nazi-occupied Europe. The year is 1942, and you are hundreds of miles from freedom, surrounded by barbed wire, armed guards, and the crushing weight of captivity. Your only connection to the outside world comes in the form of Red Cross packages and occasional care parcels from home. One day, a board game arrives at your camp. It is a simple Monopoly set, seemingly innocent, designed to help pass the endless hours of boredom. But as you open the box and begin to set up the game, you notice something peculiar. Hidden beneath the board, tucked inside the playing pieces, and concealed within the stacks of colorful play money lies something that could change everything. Real maps, actual currency, a working compass, a metal file capable of cutting through iron bars. This is not just a game. This is your ticket to freedom. Before I continue with this incredible story, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with anyone who loves fascinating history. Trust me, you are going to hear how this brilliant scheme unfolded. The story of how British intelligence transformed a beloved family board game into one of the most ingenious escape tools of World War II begins with a man named Christopher Clayton Hutton. Known to his colleagues simply as Clutty, Hutton was an inventor working for a top-secret branch of British military intelligence called MI9. While most people have heard of MI5 and MI6, the agencies responsible for domestic security and foreign intelligence respectively, far fewer know about MI9. This clandestine organization had one primary mission: to help Allied prisoners of war escape from enemy captivity and make their way back to Britain. Hutton was the perfect man for this job. He was eccentric, creative, and possessed an almost obsessive attention to detail. Before the war, he had worked in various industries, including journalism and film production. He had once famously wagered that he could escape from a locked box that had been presented to the great Harry Houdini. Hutton won that bet, and his experience thinking like an escape artist would prove invaluable in his new role. When Hutton joined MI9 in 1939, he immediately set to work developing escape and evasion equipment that could be smuggled to prisoners of war. The challenge was immense. Everything he created had to be small enough to conceal, durable enough to survive the journey, and clever enough to fool German censors who carefully inspected every package entering the camps. The Germans were not stupid. They knew that Britain would try to help its captured soldiers, and they employed teams of inspectors to examine every parcel, letter, and care package that arrived at the camps. Hutton's genius lay in his ability to hide things in plain sight. He developed hollow chess pieces that contained compasses. He created playing cards that could be soaked in water to reveal hidden maps. He designed pens that concealed tools and buttons that doubled as miniature compasses. But his most ambitious project involved partnering with a company that millions of people around the world associated with family fun and innocent entertainment. John Waddington Ltd was a printing and packaging company based in Leeds, England. Among their many products, they held a license to manufacture and sell Monopoly in the United Kingdom. What made Waddington particularly valuable to MI9 was their expertise in printing on silk. During the war, the company had been contracted to produce silk maps for the military. Unlike paper maps, silk maps were silent when unfolded, could survive being submerged in water, and could be hidden in the lining of clothing without creating telltale rustling sounds. Silk maps had already proven their worth in helping downed air crews evade capture, and Hutton saw an opportunity to use Waddington's capabilities for something even more ambitious. Hutton approached Waddington with a proposal so sensitive that only a handful of employees would ever know the full scope of what they were doing. The plan was simple in concept but extraordinarily complex in execution. Waddington would manufacture special Monopoly sets that contained everything a prisoner of war would need to escape and survive. These modified games would then be sent to prison camps across Nazi-occupied Europe, hidden among the thousands of regular care packages that flowed through charitable organizations. The first challenge was figuring out how to pack so much material into a space that would normally contain nothing more than a game board, some tokens, and stacks of play money. Hutton and his team worked meticulously, testing different configurations until they found the perfect arrangement. The game boards themselves were specially constructed with hollow compartments. Inside these hidden spaces, they placed silk maps that show detailed escape routes from specific prison camps to neutral countries like Switzerland, Sweden, and Spain. The monopoly money presented another opportunity. Mixed in with the colorful plate currency were real banknotes. German Reichsmarks, Italian lire, and French francs were carefully sorted and hidden within the stacks. A prisoner who knew what to look for could extract enough genuine money to bribe guards, purchase food, or pay for transportation during an escape attempt. The Germans might inspect the money, but they would see piles of obviously fake game currency and never think to look for the real bills hidden among them. The playing tokens were modified to serve dual purposes. Some contained tiny compasses. Their needles magnetized a point north. Others held miniature files that could be used to cut through window bars or fencing. Even the game's dice were examined for potential uses, though the small size limited what could be concealed inside them. But hiding the materials was only half the battle. Hutton needed a way to get these special games to the right prisoners without alerting German intelligence. He could not simply ship boxes marked with secret codes. The Germans intercepted and analyzed everything. They photographed packaging, recorded serial numbers, and kept detailed records of which organizations sent which items. Any suspicious pattern would immediately draw attention and potentially compromise the entire operation. The solution involved creating a network of fictitious charitable organizations. These fake charities would send packages to prison camps, and among the legitimate supplies would be the modified Monopoly sets. The games were marked with a subtle indicator that only the prisoners would recognize. A tiny red was placed in a specific corner of the box, invisible to anyone who did not know to look for it. Prisoners who received games with this mark knew that something special awaited them inside. But how did the prisoners know what to look for? MI9 had developed an elaborate communication system that briefed servicemen before they were deployed to combat zones. Part of their training included information about how to identify escape materials if they were captured. They were told about the red dots, about the hollow compartments, about where to find maps and compasses and files. This information was compartmentalized carefully. Not every soldier knew every detail, but enough information was shared that prisoners could pass knowledge to one another once inside the camps. The games were distributed strategically based on geographic location. Prisoners held in camps near the Swiss border received games with maps showing routes to Switzerland. Those in northern Germany got maps highlighting paths to the Baltic coast, where they might find fishing boats willing to carry them to Sweden. The currency hidden in each game corresponded to the countries a prisoner would pass through during an escape. What made this operation particularly brilliant was the cover it provided. Board games and other recreation materials were actively encouraged by camp administrators. The Germans believed that prisoners who were occupied with games and entertainment were less likely to cause trouble or attempt escapes. They saw Monopoly and other diversions as tools of pacification, never suspecting that they were weapons of liberation. Guards would watch prisoners playing Monopoly for hours, completely unaware that those same prisoners were studying real maps hidden beneath the board and planning escapes that would be funded by the money tucked inside. The operation was so secret that even many people within the British government did not know it existed. The workers at Waddington who assembled the special games were sworn to absolute secrecy. They signed the Official Secrets Act and were forbidden from discussing their work with anyone, including family members. The few employees who knew the full scope of what they were doing understood that lives depended on their silence. Norman Watson, who would later become chairman of Waddington, was one of the people involved in the operation. Decades later, after the project was finally declassified, Watson shared some of the details of how the company approached this extraordinary assignment. The workers involved took immense pride in their contribution to the war effort, knowing that every game they modified could mean the difference between freedom and captivity, between life and death. The number of successful escapes that resulted directly from these Monopoly games is difficult to calculate. Many escapees did not keep detailed records of exactly which tools they used, and those who did were often reluctant to share specifics even after the war ended. The entire operation remained classified for more than 50 years, and those who participated honored their oath of secrecy until the files were finally opened. However, historians estimate that during World War II, more than 35,000 Allied prisoners of war successfully escaped from German and Italian prison camps. While not all of these escapes involved Monopoly sets, a significant number benefited from the tools and maps hidden inside them. The silk maps alone proved invaluable. Escapees reported that having accurate, detailed maps of the surrounding terrain dramatically increased their chances of reaching neutral territory. One of the most famous escapes of the war took place at Stalag Luft III, a prison camp specifically designed to hold captured airmen. This escape, which later became the basis of the classic film The Great Escape, involved over 70 prisoners breaking out through hand-dug tunnels. While the Monopoly connection to this particular escape is not definitively established, many of the tools and techniques used by the prisoners were similar to those provided through MI9's various smuggling operations. The culture of escape that pervaded camps like Stalag Luft III was fostered in part by the knowledge that Britain was actively supporting escape attempts. The psychological impact of the Monopoly operation extended beyond the practical value of the hidden materials. For prisoners, knowing that their country had not forgotten them, that people back home were working tirelessly to help them, provided an enormous boost of morale. Captivity was psychologically devastating. Prisoners faced constant uncertainty about their future, poor food, inadequate medical care, and the crushing boredom of having nothing meaningful to do. Receiving a care package, even one as seemingly mundane as a board game, reminded prisoners that they were still connected to the world beyond the barbed wire. The symbolism of using Monopoly was particularly poignant. Here was a game about acquiring property, building wealth, and achieving financial freedom for prisoners who had lost everything, who spent their days in cramped barracks far from home. The irony was not lost, but the deeper message was clear. Britain was sending its prisoners the tools to get out of jail, quite literally. The game's famous jail square, with its instruction to collect $200 upon release, took on new meaning when the entire purpose of the modified game was to help players escape imprisonment. Christopher Clayton Hutton continued his work throughout the war, developing increasingly sophisticated escape equipment. He created boot heels that contained compasses, flying boots that converted into civilian shoes to help downed airmen blend in with local populations, and dozens of other ingenious devices. His autobiography, published after the war, revealed many of his inventions but notably excluded some of his most sensitive projects. The full scope of his contributions to Allied escape efforts may never be completely known. After the war, Hutton struggled to receive proper recognition for his work. Like many who served in intelligence roles, his contributions were classified, preventing him from discussing what he had done. While soldiers received medals and public praise, those who worked behind the scenes remained anonymous. This was particularly frustrating for Hutton, who believed that his inventions had saved thousands of lives. He spent years fighting for acknowledgement, eventually publishing his memoirs despite government objections. The story of the Monopoly escape kits remained largely unknown to the public until the 1980s and 90s, when documents were declassified and participants began sharing their memories. Philip Orbons, a historian who specialized in the history of Monopoly, helped bring the story to wider attention through his research and publications. His work revealed how one of America's most beloved games had played an unexpected role in one of history's most devastating conflicts. The legacy of this operation extends beyond the specific escapes it facilitated. It demonstrated the value of creative thinking in intelligence work. Traditional spy operations focus on gathering information and disrupting enemy activities. The Monopoly project showed that intelligence agencies could also play humanitarian roles, helping protect and rescue their own people. This lesson influenced post-war thinking about the responsibilities nations have to their captured servicemen. The operation also highlighted the importance of public-private partnerships in wartime. Waddington was not a defense contractor. They made games, greeting cards, and printing products. Yet, when approached by the government with an unusual and critically important mission, they rose to the challenge. The workers who produced these special games were civilians contributing to the war effort in a way that few could have imagined. Their story is a reminder that victory in war depends on countless contributions, many of which never received public recognition. For those interested in World War II history, the Monopoly escape kits represent just one example of the remarkable ingenuity that both sides displayed during the conflict. The war prompted unprecedented innovation in technology, tactics, and tradecraft. Radar, jet engines, nuclear weapons, and countless other developments emerged from the desperate necessity of war. But alongside these massive technological achievements were smaller, quieter innovations that made critical differences in individual lives. Today, original wartime Monopoly sets with escape materials are extraordinarily rare. Most were destroyed after use, their components consumed in escape attempts. The few that survive are highly prized by collectors and museums. The Imperial War Museum in London holds several examples of wartime escape equipment, including some of the silk maps that were hidden in games and other everyday objects. If you ever find yourself playing Monopoly, passing around colorful money, and arguing about who gets to be the top hat, take a moment to remember the soldiers who played the same game in very different circumstances. For them, the money was real, the maps showed routes to freedom, and the game itself was literally a matter of life and death. The next time you draw a get-out-of-jail-free card, think about the British intelligence officers who turned that playful concept into reality. They created an entire operation dedicated to helping prisoners get out of jail, and they had the tools inside a game that everyone knew and no one suspected. This remarkable piece of history reminds us that courage and creativity can emerge in the most unexpected places. A board game company in Leeds, an eccentric inventor with a background in magic tricks, a network of fake charities, tiny red dots on cardboard boxes. These seemingly unconnected elements came together to form one of the most ingenious escape operations of the Second World War. More than 75 years after the war ended, this story continues to captivate audiences because it speaks to universal themes: the desire for freedom, the refusal to accept captivity, the willingness of people to take extraordinary risks to help others, and the remarkable things that become possible when creative minds focus on solving impossible problems. The Germans thought they had created escape-proof camps. They had guards, dogs, searchlights, and sophisticated security systems. They inspected every package that entered, looking for anything suspicious. But they never imagined that their enemies would hide everything needed for escape inside a simple board game. They never thought to check whether the play money was actually play money, or whether the game board had hidden compartments. This failure of imagination on the part of German intelligence was not unique. Throughout history, security systems have been defeated not by overwhelming force, but by creative thinking. The people who built these systems could not conceive of how they might be circumvented, and so they never protected against threats they could not imagine. For modern readers, this story offers a lesson about assumptions. We all make assumptions about what is possible and what is impossible, about what threats are real and which ones are too far-fetched to consider. But history repeatedly shows that the impossible becomes possible when motivated people commit themselves to finding solutions. The Monopoly escape kits seemed impossible until they were real, saving lives and delivering freedom to men who had given up hope. So remember, the next time you pass go and collect your $200, that there was a time when that play money could have been your ticket home. A time when a simple board game represented something far greater than entertainment. A time when hidden inside every piece and every card was a promise of freedom.